afternoon and welcome to Manchester and welcome to the first in CMEC's debate series for Conservative Party Conference 2025. I'm Charlotte Leslie and I'm the Director of the Conservative Middle East Council. I think we're all very, very aware that we're gathering at a time of, in the aftermath of a diabolical and tragic attack on a synagogue here in Manchester. And then this morning we had the devastating news that there's been an arson attack on a mosque in Brighton. And I think it's no exaggeration to say that we all know we're living in increasingly polarised and dangerous times for many communities. In those times, CMEC is here to try and depolarise, cast light, not heat on issues, and try to understand how we can de-escalate and help communities understand each other better, even in the most adverse of circumstances. I'm delighted to be joined here today to talk about the life of Christians, Christianity and the Church in a changing Israeli political dynamic by four key experts. To my right is Jamie Eyre. Jamie joined Embrace the Middle East organisation in 2013 to lead their programmes and partnerships after working with international NGOs in Afghanistan, Sudan, Somalia, amongst others. He became CEO of Embrace the Middle East in July 2024 and leads a dedicated team working with local Christian partners across the Middle East. To my right, Ghanem Nusbeibeh is a London businessman and founder of Cornerstone Global Associates, a London-based strategy and management consultancy. He's chairman of a UK-based charity, Muslims Against Antisemitism. He was educated at Imperial College, and as a student, he headed a countrywide interfaith student group that aimed to bring together Jewish, Christian, and Muslim students. He's a former senior visiting fellow at King's College London and Harvard University Centre for Ethics. And Ghanem is a keen and active supporter of interfaith dialogue in both Britain and the Middle East. To my left, a bit further, Major General Jonathan Shaw is a retired British Army officer. He studied PPE at Trinity, Oxford, before heading to Sandhurst. He was commissioned into the Parachute Regiment in 1980, has seen service in the Falklands Campaign, Northern Ireland, Cyprus, the Balkans twice, Afghanistan and Iraq. He was appointed commanding officer of the 2nd Paras in 1997, made commander of the 12th Mechanised Brigade in 2002, and appointed assistant chief of the Defence Staff in 2009. Joining remotely from East Jerusalem on your screen is Mrs. Hana Kirreh, who is a social activist, researcher, and mother of 2 young boys. She lives in East Jerusalem and holds an MA in Jerusalem Studies from Al-Quds University. She's obtained a certificate for the International Fellowship of Reconciliation and has spoken widely on the challenges facing Palestinian Christians and women's rights. To all our panellists and to Hannah joining remotely, welcome and thank you very much. Now, I'm going to ask each of our panellists just to give a short 5 to 7 minutes resume of their perspective and position. We'll facilitate a little bit of discussion between us, and then I'd very much like to open this up to the floor for questions and discussions. To set the scene, I'm going to ask Major General Jonathan Shaw just to describe for us the changing dynamics internally within Israeli politics at the moment. Jonathan, over to you.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, a 5-minute challenge. Yes. My authority for talking about this was really the 4 years I spent as the Ministry of Defence's senior liaison to Israel. Israel being so politically contentious that liaison with the Israeli military was capped at the 2-star level, officially. Unofficially, people still spoke. So from 2009 to 2012, I had frequent meetings with the IDF, who then, maybe not now, but then were certainly following in the secular tradition of people like Moshe Dayan and people like that. And we had a very interesting talk. My focus, therefore, on Israel is about security and the pragmatic security that a lot of the Israeli Defense Force and security forces are operating in. My first visit, I was really struck by how disputatious people were. I mentioned this at a conference afterwards to a New York professor, Jewish professor, who seemed insulted. She said, "We are the most disputatious people in the world." And they have indeed the highest proportion of lawyers to the population in the world. So what? Well, it means that the nature of their politics is very heated. It's very acrimonious. It's very disputatious. And that should give a lie to anyone here in England who imagines we ought to have proportional representation, because that would guarantee that we had sort of compromise and meeting the middle ground. Well, I think the Israeli example shows that that's absolutely not the case. To put it in figures, 120 seats Knesset. Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition has 67 seats, of which 14 are held by Smotrich religious Zionism, and he's the finance minister, and 6 are held by Ben-Gvir's Jewish Power, and he's the security minister. And those 20 seats basically hold Netanyahu and the Knesset, and indeed, therefore, Israel, hostage. And the reason that that's so important to Netanyahu being held hostage by them is that if he lost the election and got thrown out, if the coalition collapsed, he'd fail prosecution in court, and he would also face a backlash against the 7th October attack. So he is in hock to these two extremists. If I give you one example of an incident that happened, which I think received too little publicity in the West, but to me symbolizes the coup that, in my view, has happened in Israeli politics. It happened on the 24th of July in 2024. It happened at an Israeli detention center at a place called Sidi Taiman, when a Palestinian prisoner had to be admitted to hospital because he'd been so violently sexually abused by the IDF in that camp that he had to go for treatment in a hospital because it was life-threatening. Minister Gallant sent in the IDF to arrest the people who'd done this. Hearing this, Ben-Gvir, the security minister, rustled up a whole lot of settlers, including a member of the Knesset from the Zionist party, and they went in and stopped the arrest happening. And Ben-Gvir went public and said, "These people are not criminals, they are heroes." I think that shows you the sort of stranglehold that the extreme religious right has on the politics of Israel. And there are various quotes in Knesset which I could go into, but perhaps later. Anyway, so what? What we are seeing, or what I personally witnessed in Israel, is that there's a shifting balance of power from the secular to the religious Jews. Moshe Dayan, you remember, hero of 1967-73, was very much a secular Jew, and indeed much of Israel was established on the basis of secular Jewry. But the religious nationalists are taking a far stronger hold on the country, and indeed, if you look at the demographics, whereas at the moment 45% of Israeli Jews declare themselves to be secular, the 10% Haradai and 12% Orthodox, they have a far greater birth rate than the secular people, and indeed there's said to be a 4% rise per annum of Haradai in the population. So you can see the way the demographics are shifting in Israel to make it a more religiously extreme country. So what? Well, it means that if you're going to be exclusive about religious Jewry, then the secular Jews are already worried about this, because on the record, leaders of the religious community have said they would happily cut the throats of secular Jews. And it's not just the other Jews that are in trouble. Potentially all non-religious Jews are in trouble. And look at what's happened to the Christians since the attacks of the 7th of October, the rise in attacks post-7th of October. 2020-24, there were 111 documented attacks versus Christians. In the first quarter of 25, there have been 44 attacks. In 1922, there were 25% of Jerusalem was Christian. Now it's less than 1%. This shows what's happening to the Christian population in Israel. And if you care about that, if you care about Christianity in the Middle East, if you care about Christianity and multi-faith, indeed, I think if you want to be a real supporter of Israel, you'd be saying, how do we end this religious, this autocratic approach?
What's the source of your data?
Experience. I can give you all sorts of stuff later.
Perhaps we can. That's a good question. Can we
discuss it? It's a good question. Talk about it later
when we open to question and answers.
I don't recognise that.
Okay. Please, can we do this as questions and answers? Well, certainly that will be the first question we'll answer. Jonathan, please.
Yeah, that's the end. That's the end of my 5 minutes.
Jamie, can I come to you to give an overview of what you're seeing from the various partners you represent, you work with and represent, or work with?
Charlotte, thank you very much. Very quick round the houses for Embrace. So we're a 170-year-old organisation. A British reverend travelled to the Middle East. He realised that sending missionaries wasn't the way to support communities. And so with Lord Shaftesbury, very quickly, he founded Embrace the Middle East. We became, founded the Turkish Aid Mission Society. We became Embrace the Middle East in 2012. And we today continue to work with local Christians across the whole of the region. So we support around 40 organisations across Lebanon, Syria, Israel, Palestine, Egypt and Iraq, spending something like £2.5 million on grants supporting health, education, community development, and it's completely ecumenical, so across the entire spread of the kind of the Christian continuum. I want to start a little bit outside Israel just for the moment. 6 years ago, Dr. Soraya Beshliniani, who was the then General Secretary of the Middle East Council of Churches, came to speak to us. And let me paraphrase as she said this when talking about Christians. Talk to us, listen to us. We are not a minority, we belong. Don't characterise us as persecuted. We are much more than this. Except perhaps in places like Syria, we face the same pressures as everyone else. She was challenging kind of simplistic narratives which speak about Middle East Christians in a very simple way. And you could really say what she was saying is don't instrumentalise or exceptionalise us. So shifting to the situation in Israel and the West Bank, this week the Reverend Jack Sara, who is the president of the Bethlehem Bible College, who lives in West Jerusalem but works in Bethlehem, he was responding to a claim by Benjamin Netanyahu which described Israel as the sole thriving sanctuary for Christians in the Middle East. And he wrote this: "The narrative of modern Israel as the only haven is not just incomplete, it actively obscures troubling realities within its borders and dismisses the resilience of our brothers and sisters in surrounding nations." I mean, building on what Jonathan has just said, from what I've heard and through the people that I regularly interact with, since 2022, since the advent of this particular governing coalition, it has become a more difficult place for Christians to operate in. Things have definitely become more polarised, and increasingly so since October the 7th, which is completely understandable. I could share many stories of settler land confiscation, of olive trees burned, of intimidation across the West Bank and across East Jerusalem, affecting Christians and Muslims alike. So it is not just Christians, so we shouldn't set them apart. And even Bethlehem is not exempt. Settlement activity is often unchecked. Sometimes it appears to be aided and abetted by the IDF, and this clearly places a heavy toll on communities, and Christians are suffering the same situation. So since the October 2023, around 200 families, so that's about 1,100 people, if we're being conservative, have left Bethlehem. That's from a Christian population of 45,000 in the West Bank. That's significant. Studies show that the emigration is not driven by Muslim fundamentalism, which is sometimes kind of a first assumption. But talking to the individuals who've left, they talk about economic hardship, they talk about restriction of movement, they talk about settler violence. Life has become much more difficult on every level. Living and working has definitely become harder since this current government took office. But I would also argue, and my Palestinian friends would say the same thing, that what we're seeing isn't entirely new. It's an acceleration, and there is a boldness from extreme groups, similar to what Jonathan was saying, and some of these are now rooted in government. Just to give you an example of two organisations that we work with and how they've had to adapt, two disability-focused partners who run centres of excellence, one in East Jerusalem by the Mount of Olives, one in Bethlehem. Both of them have had to change how they work because travelling is suddenly very, very difficult. So if you're an organisation that sends teams from Bethlehem to Jenin or Bethlehem to Hebron, it's simply not possible during one day because the limitations on travel, new gates that have been put up by the RDF to kind of limit movement, are effectively throttling Palestinian travel. One of the organisations has basically had to recruit two new teams to allow them to continue operating, otherwise they couldn't work. Jonathan alluded to this and said it more eloquently than I will, but in Jerusalem you're definitely seeing an emboldened settler groups, desecration of churches. Spitting on clergy is a fairly documented and unfortunately regular occurrence. This is not the thriving sanctuary that Prime Minister Netanyahu describes. I'd also lean a little bit into the 2018 nation-state law, which prioritised Jewish identity, and it kind of gives a little bit of symbolic cover to this sort of behaviour. A Palestinian friend who is Israeli by citizenship, his family come from Lod, they've been connected for a very long time, says that even this law itself started to reduce his connection to the land and his sense of legitimacy. And critics would sometimes call this law a kind of a step away from liberal democracy and towards ethno-nationalism. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a safe Jewish state, absolutely not. Jewish identity, Israel's role as a haven for Jews, absolutely vital, so that's not something that needs to go away. The question is, how are non-Jews, how are Christians with centuries of roots accommodated and given equal rights? Is that even possible? Just to finish, Charlotte posed the question, Jamie, so what's good? Because I could paint a very bleak picture. I don't want to do that because, excuse me, there are good things to say. We work with a fantastic organisation called Masalaha, which in its name means reconciliation. Since 1990, they've been building bridges between Palestinians, Christians and Muslims and Israeli Jews. For 13 years, we've supported them as they have desert encounters to bring these groups of people together, to build bridges, to try and remove the other and sort of build small forms of community, very grassroots, neutral spaces that allow people to walk on a journey of reconciliation together. In September, they've actually been extending their work, and they ran some interesting groups with Jewish and Palestinians citizens from Lod and Ramla, cities with 20 to 30% Palestinian population. After a week when there'd been violence in those cities between those populations, these people came together, and it was really interesting to watch the respect grow as they spent time talking to each other. They genuinely care about trying to build a community together, and it's something about bringing people into shared spaces that's really important. There's much I haven't said. Gaza's Christian population has halved since October 7th. It was 1,300, it's now 500. We know that some Christians will stay after the end when peace finally dawns, but their existence is precarious. Just to end with a couple of thoughts, really. A friend of mine who leads a church in the old city often meets international Christians, and one of the first things they say to him, "When did you convert?" So his joke in reply is, well, my uncle's uncle's uncle was in the upper room. Now, I know that's hyperbole, so clearly that's not true. But he's making the point. Palestinian Christians go back to the time of Christ. They go back 2,000 years. They are rooted, and they will remain so as long as they can. We need to understand their predicament. We need to understand the predicament of all non-Jews with roots in Israel and in Palestine or the occupied territories, and not lean into simplistic narratives which aren't quite what they seem. I'll finish there.
Jamie, thank you very much. And on your screen, we have Hana joining us from East Jerusalem. Hana, welcome. Thank you very much. I wonder if you could paint us a picture as we sit here in Manchester of what life feels like for you and your Christian community on a daily basis. Just give us some first-person perspective would be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Charlotte. And hello, everyone. This is Hana Kirreh speaking from East Jerusalem. I'm a Christian. I think I'm very happy to hear my colleagues today. And I would like to talk a bit about our real life. So Christians, including my family, have been living in the Holy Land, the cradle of Christianity, with an unbroken presence since the time of Jesus and the apostles. Our roots are strong and timeless as the stones of the old city of Jerusalem. Jesus calls himself the living stone, and we are all included in his image. Every Palestinian Christian is a living stone with a vital role in building up the church. The living stones of the Holy Land are historically and spiritually connected to the land where Jesus was born and where he carried out his mission of salvation. For us, Christianity is not merely history. It is the life we live each day in the very place where it began. Today, the other panelists will speak about policy or spoke about policy and politics, but my aim is simpler to tell you what it means to live as a Christian in the Holy Land. For our story itself testifies to the need for peace, justice, and preservation of our heritage. I want to share the small human details that rarely make the headlines, for the contribution is simply to add the color and texture of our presence. I belong to the St. George's Cathedral in East Jerusalem, which is a part of the Anglican Diocese of Jerusalem, located in the heart of Jerusalem. The cathedral is not only a place to worship, but also a center for interfaith dialogue and mutual respect, where people of all faiths come together in prayer. It is a place of pilgrimage for Anglicans worldwide, drawing visitors from all over the world, while also serving as a spiritual and liturgical home for the local Anglican community. Normally, many pilgrims attend to join Arabic English service, but due to the current situation, the church now stands without pilgrims. Our church is not just a building, it is the backbone of our existence. It nurtures a community of Palestinian Christians who are highly educated, doctors, lawyers, educators, artists, judges, writers, and business people whose faith and vocation together embody the living witness of Christianity in this land. The Anglican Diocese of Jerusalem oversees numerous institutions, schools, and hospitals that all serve all Palestinian people regardless of religion, similar to the work of other dioceses as well. Through these institutions, the Anglican Diocese of Jerusalem not only provides essential services, but also reflects the long-standing commitment of Palestinian Christians to their society. Palestinian Christians have always been considered a voice for peace and justice, playing a key role in civil society and advocacy, and striving for reconciliation, freedom, and dignity. The profound of being a Christian lies in walking in the footsteps of our faith. At Easter, we carry our crosses down the Via Dolorosa, not as tourists, but as participants in the living continuation of that story. When I pray, I am aware that I'm only steps away from the place where the disciples themselves prayed. Yet, alongside this profound joy, it is important to recognize the challenges and hardships that the Christian community faces today in Jerusalem and in the West Bank. One of the main challenges facing our community is Christian immigration. The number of Christians in East Jerusalem and the West Bank has declined dramatically. For example, in 1948, Christians made up about 10% of the population, but today they account for only around 1% or even less. The causes of Christian immigration from the Holy Land are complex and multifaceted, involving political, economic, social, and religious factors. One of the main reasons for Christian immigration from the Holy Land is the ongoing political instability and conflict, which has created an environment of insecurity and uncertainty. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, coupled with restrictions on movement and limited access to resources, makes daily life unpredictable and challenging. Safety concerns are heightened by documented instances of violence against Palestinian Christian worshippers, including physical assaults on priests, the elderly, and families with children, as well as vandalism and attacks on churches and holy sites. In recent years, attacks by settlers, including harassment, intimidation, and property damage, have further contributed to an atmosphere of fear and vulnerability. These combined pressures prompt many Christians to seek safety, stability, and a secure future elsewhere. Expansion of settlements, land confiscation, and separation from agricultural lands have stifled economic development in towns such as Bejala and Bethlehem, making farming and oil harvesting increasingly dangerous and uncertain. This atmosphere of hostility and potential danger makes many Christians afraid to attend religious celebrations. The old city of Jerusalem is often besieged with barriers that prevent locals from reaching the Holy Sepulchre during events like the Holy Fire. Such restrictions have increased over the past 2 years, affecting Easter, Palm Sunday, and other religious observances. For many Palestinian Christians, Easter has become a time of erasure and exclusion rather than a celebration and a renewal of hope. Economic hardship is another major facing and driving Christian immigration from the Holy Land. Limited job opportunities, high unemployment, and the difficulty of sustaining businesses make it challenging for families to secure a stable livelihood. Rising living costs and economic uncertainty push many Christians to seek better opportunities abroad, while dependence on foreign aid in some communities adds to this vulnerability. For many, the lack of economic stability makes leaving the Holy Land seem like the only viable option for a secure future. Social and demographic pressures also contribute to Christian immigration from the Holy Land. Palestinian Christians are a small minority with a larger society, which can lead to feelings of marginalization and insecurity. Young people often leave to pursue higher education and career opportunities abroad, and many do not return, contributing to a declining population. In addition, social tensions and the challenges of maintaining a stable community environment push families to seek safer and more supportive settings elsewhere. Religious and cultural concerns are another significant factor. In Christian immigration, in Christian immigration from the Holy Land. Many Christians feel that their faith and cultural identity are under pressure in a predominantly Muslim or Jewish context. The desire is to raise children in a safe environment where they can freely practice their religion and preserve their tradition, often motivates families to leave. For some, immigration is seen as a way to ensure the continuity of their faith and cultural heritage in a more supportive and secure setting. Adding to this, legal and political restrictions also contribute to Christian immigration from the Holy Land. Limitations on property ownership, building, and residency make it difficult for families to establish long-term stability. Bureaucratic obstacles, travel restrictions, and unequal access to essential services and further pressure, creating an environment where daily life can be uncertain and challenging. These factors often push Christians to seek a more secure and stable future outside the Holy Land. Family reunification and the pursuit of global opportunities are also important factors in Christian immigration from the Holy Land. Once some families move abroad, others often follow to join them, creating chains of immigration. Additionally, Western countries offer better educational and career prospects, drawing young Christians who hope for a more secure and prosperous future. These opportunities, combined with the desire for family unity, contribute significantly to the ongoing immigration of Palestinian Christians. Despite these challenges, our hope is not based on temporary politics or promises. It is founded on the faith and enduring presence of our Christian community in this land. Palestinian Christians are living stones, witnesses to a faith that has preserved for centuries. We ask that the global Christian community see us and recognize our reality, not just the headlines. Support our local institutions, our schools, hospitals, and community centers, which anchor families and keep our roots strong. Pray for our steadfastness, thabat, sumud, that we remain the vibrant color in the tapestry of this holy city. The future of Palestinian Christians in the Holy Land is shaped by both significant challenges and enduring hope. Their continued presence is threatened by political instability, movement restrictions, settler attacks, economic hardship, and immigration. Without decisive action to address these pressures, the Christian population may continue to decline, which would profoundly affect the cultural, social, and religious fabric of this historic land. Yet, despite these obstacles, the community has shown remarkable resilience. Palestinian Christians have endured for centuries, preserving their faith, traditions, and institutions, even in the face of adversity.
Hana, I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to ask if you can include your points in question and answers, because we have one more speaker to get through. Would that be okay if we can come back to you?
Okay, 1 minute. Sorry, I have a long one, but maybe 1 minute if you allow me. If not, that's fine.
Very, very briefly, because we have another speaker who's yet to speak, and we're running out of time.
Yeah, I'm sorry for...
Don't worry, there's a lot to say, but just very, very quickly, and forgive me if I cut you off.
It's okay. Yeah, so I just conclude this by saying about the steadfastness, about the support of the Christian community, and how it is important that the global community also holds responsibility for the steadfastness of the Christian community. That's fine. It's okay.
Hana, thank you so much. It's difficult when you're not in the room, but thank you so much.
It's fine. Okay. I'm so sorry if I made you...
Please don't apologise at all. I'm going to finally come to Ghanem to give your perspective. And you come from a family with a particular connection to both this issue and the region. And perhaps you can talk us through your perspective briefly, and then we'll come back in question and answers to other things.
Of course. Thanks, Charlotte. My family are custodians of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. I'll be brief, and I'll try to be as objective as possible in such a debate. It's important to realise, and I think we all acknowledge, this is not about demonising Israel. We want to help Israel get out of a situation that was created by everyone. We're trying to identify the problems. The situation is not ideal, but it's not disastrous, and it can be fixed. And hopefully, discussions like this can help us move in that direction. I'll briefly talk about two things. One is the historical perspective, and the other is the regional context. Historical perspective, I think both Jamie and Jonathan have covered that. Whatever the percentage of Christians was before 1948 in historical Palestine, which is now Israel and Palestine, has dramatically dropped, not because Christians were specifically targeted, but because they were part of the Palestinian population that became refugees in 1948. Afterwards, Christians reasonably, whoever remained, obviously faced whatever other Palestinians faced in Israel proper. Those who were in the West Bank, in Jordan, 2 Christians became mayors of Jerusalem under Jordanian rule. A couple of foreign ministers in Jordan, and became really part of the government in Jordan. Those who went to Lebanon, about 30,000 immigrated to Lebanon as refugees. Unlike the Palestinian Muslims who went to Lebanon, most of them were given citizenship in Lebanon, and really became part of the building of the Lebanese state. And I can give you a list of names. I don't think we've got time for this now, but key in building the banking sector, construction sector, the tourism sector, etc. So the Palestinian Christians have thrived wherever they have been. 67 obviously changed things, and there was a further hit on the number of Christians in historical Palestine, in the West Bank and Gaza, what we now call Palestinian territories. Christians face those challenges not again because they were targeted, specifically because they were Christians, and that's where we go to the, I think, important to mention the regional context. The Levant hasn't really seen any wars like the rest of the world. It's a very peaceful region until, obviously, 1948. The last time Christians were attacked was in 1860 in Damascus. It was a horrible massacre led by the Druze. And Kurds and then Muslim Sunnis participated. 12,000 Christians were killed, if I'm not mistaken, in Damascus. Things were then very peaceful. Then 1948, and then you all know the history. Christians then became target of extremist Islamist groups, whether it's ISIS in Iraq and Syria, or whether when Muslim Brotherhood were in power in Egypt for a couple of years before Sisi took over. They were targeted because they were Christian. That is a very different situation on what is happening to Christians in Israel and in Palestine, except with what Jamie mentioned, the spitting on clergy by individual extremist Jewish settlers. Unfortunately, they are not persecuted enough, and perhaps directly encouraged by the current Israeli government. And that is, I think, the problem, that if we do not stand together as supporters of Israel and as Palestinians, as Israelis, and people who want the Middle East to thrive, to try to apply the brakes on what the current Israeli government is doing. Otherwise, the situation will become. The situation can be salvaged now, but we are heading to a point where it cannot be salvaged. When Israel and Palestine becomes totally depopulated from Christians, it will be very difficult to repopulate the oldest religious, continuously existing religious group in the Holy Land. Thanks, Charlotte.
Ghanem, thank you very much. Now I'm going to use my chairman's prerogative and just ask a couple of questions before opening to the floor, and you, sir, I'll ask your question first. Broadly, really to Ghanem and Jonathan, but Jamie and Hana come in. So it seems that what we're describing is a government, Netanyahu's government, driven disproportionately by a minority interest group because of the voting system, which is encouraging divisive behaviour. How much dissent is there in Israeli society about the more extreme religious nationalist movement? Is this something that the population in general are happy with, or are they concerned? And secondly, Jamie, you mentioned the bridge builders. Often it's the extreme voices that get heard the loudest. How can we amplify the reconciliation and the bridge builders? And to Hana as well. That's a large question, but perhaps we can kick off quick Q&As with just a brief discussion of that.
If you want the civil unrest, there are some people who say that October the 7th saved Israel from a civil war. Because such were the revolts on the streets, such were the mass protests in the streets against what the Netanyahu government was doing on the legal system and other ways. So some people have said that actually it was that serious, that they were on the brink of civil war. So yes, there was a lot of unrest. And there are many undercurrents that I detect reading the Israeli press and reading the Western observation on Israel as to whether Netanyahu are the massive Israeli population pro-Palestine? Not particularly. Are they pro the war? They're probably more pro the war, but they want the hostages back. There are many different cross-cuttings. It's very difficult to get a feel for what they'd actually vote. It really much depends what the question is that you ask. But I think on the civil unrest side, I think there was no doubt that shift of the constitution to the religious right was resented by a lot of the population, and you saw those hundreds of thousands of people on the street protesting against that.
Is that something that you would see from your visits?
I think so, and I think it's also important to recognise, and perhaps we don't see much of it because the Jewish population in Israel was obviously a majority, but a lot of secular mainstream Jews who were the majority of Israel as we traditionally know it are also uncomfortable staying in a country which is run by religious fanatics.
Yeah.
So you have Christians leaving, you have Muslims leaving from the Palestinian side, but you also have mainstream Jews who are uncomfortable, and I know many have left. I read a statistic today, 1 million Israelis now are expats, that's 10% of the population. It's a situation that, if it doesn't stop, that electoral system is going to create a country which is only inhabited by fanatics of all sides, unfortunately, Palestinian and Israeli.
Jamie and then Hannah, can I ask you about perhaps emphasise more on what bridge building is going on and how can we amplify this a little bit more?
I'll be honest, I don't know a whole lot, so it's just the organisations that I work with. We've tried to support organisations who need to have long-term patience. You've got communities which it's very hard to get people in a room together for obvious reasons. And so it's allowing sort of seeds to be sown and long journeys to be walked.
So huge amounts of trauma on all sides.
Yeah.
Israeli society has
Absolutely.
suffered diabolically from terror attacks and historical trauma.
And something that's encouraged me is one of the groups that we are in kind of support of has family members of people who are caught in the awful events of October the 7th, as well as Palestinians who live in the West Bank. So you're kind of pulling together kind of very disparate extremes, but recognising it's a very, very difficult journey to walk, and there's a need for kind of a reconciliation and forgiveness on both sides.
Hannah, if I... Oh,
Okay.
so very briefly, Hannah, you live in a society, and we're talking about a society where there is a lot of trauma on all sides. How do you see, is there a role for Christians and Muslims and Jews in trying to mend that trauma, and do you see any of that happening in the society you're living in?
Yeah, I think it's very important for everyone to know that building bridges is much better than building walls. So in order to have a very healthy society where everyone enjoys freedom and human rights and equal rights, we have to admit for diversity. So in order to have this kind of diversity for everyone, for Muslims, for Christians, for Jews to live together, we have to respect the ethnicity and other faiths as well, and to keep this saved from any hatred speech. This is very important. By doing this, we have all to work together as allies, to work with our stakeholders, the local ones, the ones who are living around us, our friends, those who are living abroad, and who support the presence of the Christian people as well as the Palestinian rights to live in harmony and dignity in their own land.
Thank you. Jonathan, you have a...
Yes, just to answer the question that came earlier, where was my source of information? It was a place called the Rossing Centre for Education and Dialogue, which is based in Jerusalem and is aimed at reconciliation between the people, what we're talking about. My own personal view on to show the level of discontent, the IDF does not... When I was working with the IDF, I asked them, repeatedly about the threat situation, and I said, "What do you think is the greatest threat to Israel?" And it wasn't Iran, funnily enough. It was ourselves. They said, ourselves, because they knew that the only prime minister ever been shot by anyone was shot by an extremist right-wing nationalist in Israel. And they held that was the big threat. I said to them, are you increasingly worried that you, as a secular force, largest secular force, are increasingly representing an increasingly religious government? And they said, yes, we are. And to them, many of my friends there are now really worried about the religious extremists taking over the country, and the IDF are there to protect them. And you see that the chief of staff of the IDF even told Netanyahu that the Gaza attack would not achieve the mission's objective, which was a political one. It wouldn't achieve it, get rid of Hamas. He said it wouldn't work, but he was still told to go and do it. And that shows the level, I think, of discontent in the society.
Thank you. Now I'm going to open it up to questions. I have two already, and I'll take three at a time so we can get through it. Gentleman here first up, then lady here, and then you. And if we can keep them as shortish as possible so everyone gets a chance to contribute.
Okay, well, I'm very used to hearing demonisation of Israel, in Christian places. This is yet another one. None of this is evidence-free. That 25% of attacks, less than 1%, there's just no evidence for it whatsoever. And that's pronounced Major General Haredi, not Haredai, Haredi. Okay? Right, you've learned something. Okay, so let's continue. The nationality law. The nationality law was not a discriminatory thing. The nationality law, because Israel has no constitution, the nationality law was simply to set out the relationship of the Jewish state with Judaism. It was in no way discriminatory. It didn't ban the things being translated into Arabic, as has been suggested. It's absolute nonsense. Judicial reform. You, Major General, says judicial reform because we had October the 7th prevented civil war. That's absolute nonsense. There was a debate about judicial reform because, unlike in this country, the Supreme Court, the judges in Israel, were calling the shots. They were making policy. It's up to politicians to make policy, not up to judges. And
Sir, may I just ask what your question is?
That is what my question is. Your demonization of Israel was a factor that contributed to the deaths of 2 Jews on Yom Kippur in this city. Okay? Why are you demonizing Israel constantly? We know very well that Christians want to convert us. Christians want to convert Jews. This is not the way to go about it. Look at the fact. Israel is the only country in the world, in the Middle East, where the number of Christians is growing.
Sir,
no persecution of Christians by Jews.
Sir, may I ask if you give your name and ask a question?
Fundamentalist Muslims, please stop the lies.
Sir, can I just ask what your name is and who you are and who you represent?
You don't need to know my name, and you don't need to know who I represent.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting. Lady here.
Elma Mattett from Royal Sutton Coldfield. Going back to the debate, do you see the route to increasing Christianity through education? The reason I ask that is my father actually attended St George's School in Jerusalem, and he won the scholarship then to study medicine in the UK and was one of the last people before... Can you hear me?
No, I'm going to...
Okay, it's not on. Hello? Can you hear me now?
Yes. Sorry, I'm sorry, that was my
fault. Let me start again. Thelma Mattett from Royal Sutton Coldfield. My question, going back to the debate, is can we increase Christianity through education and building more schools? The reason I ask is my father actually attended St George's School in Jerusalem in Palestine, and then he won a scholarship to study medicine at Birmingham University in the UK, and then came to the UK. So my question is, if we build more schools, especially when we get to rebuilding Gaza, can we build or get sponsorship of schools of Christianity that can then spread the word in that way? Thank you.
Thank you. Mine is a very simple question. You said that Christian population in 1948 was 10%. Now it's 1%. But hasn't the population increased substantially since those days? And therefore the Christian population has also increased. So 1% now is more than 10% in 1948. Is that true or not?
Thank you. So we have gentleman's contribution here. We have a question about Christian education and then a question about demographics. Ghanem, can I come to you perhaps about the demographics, and then Jonathan, if you feel able to answer that?
The population of the Holy Land was 1 million in 1948, so 10% of that would be 100,000. Population now is 10 million. Let's say 10 million, 1% of that is 100,000. So in terms of numbers, I mean 45%, I think, 45,000 in the West Bank, half and half in Israel proper. So numerically, I think we're...
The numbers have increased.
Well, I mean, I haven't got the... I haven't got them...
The number is the only state in the Middle East where the numbers of Christians have increased.
So we're looking at percentages, but perhaps we can take this offline, because I think we're probably not going to agree. In terms, should we move to education is your question. I wonder if Hannah and maybe Jamie, you could answer that, but Jonathan and Ghanem, please feel free to come in if you'd like.
Yes, may I or Jamie
Hannah,
first?
please.
Hannah,
Please.
please.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, I think there are lots of Christian schools in Jerusalem, in the West Bank, and even inside the 1948, and they are doing their job as it should be. They are so much respected by the population, and they give a very excellent services. It is not, the thing is not the increasing the number of schools, though there is always a need for more schools to absorb the students, whether they are Christians or Muslims, because our schools, the Christian schools, do not only serve the Christian population, it serves everyone in society, excluding of its religion, Muslim or Christian. But raising awareness among the international community is very much important, that the international community recognizes the existence of the Christian population in the Holy Land, because there are many internationals who are not aware of the presence of Christians. This is very important. We need the support of the global community in order to keep us rooted in our country, in our city as well. Thank you.
I think just to add something that's quite interesting about the delivery of services broader than education in the West Bank is one of the largest providers are Christian organisations, interestingly. And they're something like the second or third largest employer in the Palestinian territories. Majority of their employees are not Christian, so it is a kind of a multi-faith approach. Something that we encourage is the training of Christian young people, because if one of the reasons people are leaving is because of a range of pressures, if there are ways to encourage them to stay by giving them a good education and a role within an organisation, then that's a positive thing. So we've done a fair amount of work in recent times looking at identifying leadership skills and helping young people grow and encouraging them to remain and to be active parts of their society. And I think something that Christians, Hana probably would say the same, tell me on a regular basis is we stabilise our position in society and we build good relationships, particularly in the West Bank with Muslim communities, by being active and productive, but not proselytising.
Just one comment on the schools, since they were mentioned. St. George's School has attracted a number of, before 1967, a number of Frols from Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. They used to have a boarding school, and they used to come and spend, their school education at St. George's School. Another quick story: an aunt of mine. Most Muslims go to Christian schools in Jerusalem. She went to a Catholic school, and what schools do is just Jamie said. When it becomes to religious studies, Muslims would take religious Muslim education. Christians would go to. For the first few years, my aunt was, just went accidentally to the Christian classes, and then by accident told my grandmother when we were going to church. She said, "But you're Muslim." I said, "I didn't know that." So that's how integrated Muslims and Christians are in the Palestinian territories. It's sort of something you just have written down, but it's not something that sort of we talk about tolerance. It's way beyond tolerance over there. It's full integration, and I think that's why it's difficult to say it's Christians versus Muslims in Israel Palestine.
Could I just pick up one comment? I apologise if we've miscommunicated. You seem to have heard a different message to what I've heard here. I have not heard anyone here demonise Israel. So let's be clear about it. Can I finish saying?
Please let Jonathan just make his
just
point,
say-
and then by all means
What I would simply say is that we are criticising that small section of Israeli society who have the religious right, who are instigating policies and have what we might agree with.
Israel is a coalition government. It is proportional representation, and there are a large number of sections of society. There's Russians, there's
Yes, 15%,
there's
yes.
Sephardi Jews, there's Ashkenazi Jews, and it just happens that proportional representation is the best possible system
That's not the issue.
Thank you. I think you guys, I think you can have a very interesting discussion offline.
You can argue that the threshold is too low, and I have some sympathy for the argument. It's, 3%, and you've got a representation.
Again, you're not hearing the same as I.
I think the issue is that we have two ministers who are sanctioned by the UK government who have a lot of influence, and what we're discussing is that there have been issues caused. Now, what we try to do in these events is to have some light, not heat.
It's the only party here which will stand up for Israel. Starmer is a disgrace. Don't give me Starmer and boycotting people. Starmer supports the International Court of Justice.
So I think we're probably going to have to move on to other questions.
If Netanyahu comes here, don't tell me what Starmer...
Are there any other...
He's disgusting.
Excuse me.
You want to have your say? Do you support the genocide of the Palestinian people?
Please.
The Israelis?
Sir.
Of course I support a two-state solution.
Now, sir, I'm afraid this is not what our event is about, sir.
Two-state solution with a disarmed Palestinian state, a peaceful Palestinian state, yes, and that is not happening yet.
Right, I think we'll probably return to some light, not heat, because it's generally a bit more interesting. Do we have any further questions? Sir, gentleman over there.
Not wanting to oversimplify it, but just wanting to know what could be done to redress the situation. What could be done to protect these communities? What do we see as needed?
Who would like to answer that initially? Jamie, perhaps with your overview.
Yeah, I can jump in. So the organisation I work for has kind of two roles. Part of it is about supporting Christians in their witness and helping them to remain and sustain. Part of it is about connecting with the church and Christians in the UK, and hopefully beyond that. There is something to be said about telling people that Christians are there and they exist. I came back from Lebanon not that long ago, and a friend said, "Oh, Jamie, you've got a town. Where have you been?" So I said, "I was in Lebanon." "Well, why do you go to Lebanon? Why don't you work with Christians?" And I was able to tell him that I was on the road to Damascus the previous day. The level of information is very, very low. So it's helping people understand, so realising that there are Christians, that they're active, and that they have such a large role to play in society is a good start point.
Anyone else like to come in on that? Hana?
Yes, I would like also to add that solidarity visits are very important as well. Come and see. Yep. Come and talk to real people on the ground. Talk to them, visit them in their homes. It's not only listening to politicians. It's also very important to get in touch and in contact with real people to tell you their stories, their own challenges. And this is how the global and international community can, of course, help. Something else is the churches, where they can all work under one umbrella is very, very important to have one goal, one mission, regardless of each dogma. But it is very important to have one vision and one mission. This is what I think is very important to support Christians and their presence and steadfastness in the Holy Land, in Palestine, Israel.
Ghanem, can I ask, you've done a lot of interfaith work in your career. What's your perspective?
In terms of connections between Christians in the world and Christians in the Holy Land, I think a lot more can be done and should be done. COVID has been absolutely disastrous in disconnecting the region, and then obviously the 7th of October terrorist attacks and the subsequent war. There's a lot more that can be done and needs to be done. I think fear is justified that people don't want to go to that part of the world, but I think encouraging people from the UK, from other places to go there, it is reasonably safe. If the airport is working, then you're safe. I think it's important to go and explore for yourselves. Go to Israel, go to Palestine, and see and connect to all communities there, including obviously the Christian community. It's very sad what Hana described that there are no pilgrims at St. George's Cathedral. That really is unsustainable for the continuity of the communities there.
I'm going to add a question in of my own off the back of your excellent question. Is in an era of social media where what we're fed on our social media feeds amplifies our existing, leanings, how on earth do we help each other understand different perspectives against a gradient of social media where people are making a lot of money out of polarising us? Anyone want to answer that easy question?
Well, social media oversimplifies things, and unfortunately, someone who reads a tweet thinks that they've just completed a PhD in the subject, and that's sort of that's the reality we're facing, and lack of regulation, even less regulation now, has just made things even worse. Yeah. And the reliance on mainstream media, on social media, is another factor, I think, that's snowballing the whole negative effect of social media. There's very little positive things that come out of social media compared to the negativities.
Yeah, true.
Any more questions?
I'm a former...
Oh, hang on. We're gonna wait for the microphone. There we are, thanks.
Hi, I'm Afzal Amin. I'm a former British Army officer. I worked on conflict resolution strategy with CGS John Richards. I'm sure Sean knows him very well. And I've been 5 times to Israel and Palestine. And I've tried to have an academic as well as a social appreciation of what's going on there. And of course, the last 2 years have been horrific in so many ways. What role do Palestinian Christians play with the Israeli government to try and bring about peace? Because we've seen that over the last 2 years, the combination of the political management of Israel and the military has been spectacularly incompetent in dealing with a small, tiny group of lightly armed insurgents, terrorists, whatever the label is, in Hamas. They have no tanks, they have no artillery, they have no fighter jets, they have no navies, they have no Tomahawk.
They killed 1,400 people.
Lightly armed. Lightly armed. Please be accurate what you say. That's light arms. You clearly have no knowledge of the military. That is light arms. That is not JDAMs. That is not. But it's light arms. It's handheld weapons. Please study military before you speak.
I think we're clarifying that it may be diabolical casualties.
It's not heavy military.
And how about the tunnels? How
Okay,
do you get into the tunnels?
that's dug with shovels. So please,
How do you get into the tunnels?
So I think what we're saying is that there are diabolical consequences using light arms, which is a very different proposition from diabolical consequences using a different kind of arms. We're talking about the method, not the severity, the absolutely diabolical severity of the outcome, which I don't think anyone disputes. But we're looking at the method it was done so that you can tackle that method better. If you misdiagnose how it was done, you're not going to prevent it in the future.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what the gentleman's saying.
My question's focused on a very narrow aspect, which is that we fought the war on terror for 20 years. We failed in Iraq, we failed in Afghanistan, we failed in Libya, we failed in Somalia, we failed in Syria, we failed in Yemen. And now we're looking at this conflict as a very, very different conflict to all of those. And we're seeing again spectacular failure by the state power. So when you have communities in Israel and Palestine, like Palestinian Christians, who have perhaps an extraordinarily unusual role to play in that they bridge being Palestinian and being not Muslim, what role can they play or do they play in trying to bring about peace at that level?
They took 80 hostages. How many British hostages were taken?
Who would like to answer that?
Well, I'll kick.
80 hostages left.
I'm sorry, sir. Please
I'm
be
allowed-
courteous to our panel. Thank you.
So, good question. Just
I
to.
won't give the right answer.
Oh, thank you very much. Perhaps we should listen to the head of Shin Bet, Amy Ayalon, who wrote a big article in the recent edition of Foreign Affairs in which it was entitled, "Why Israel is Fighting a War It Cannot Win." And I think that plays to your point, that Israel's defense strategy is all about defense, about the military tool. There is no political plan behind it. In fact, their whole goal is not to have a two-state solution. And Netanyahu is quite blatant about that.
We defeated Nazis and we can defeat Hamas.
I'm really going to have to ask if we can just have a civilised conversation and obey the basic courtesies of a normal event.
Stop the lying.
I'll just come in very quickly. On Hamas, I don't want to sort of divert from the Christian discussion. On Hamas, my view was that they should have been banned in the Palestinian territories long ago. Unfortunately, Netanyahu kept funding them for many years because he wanted to undermine the Palestinian Authority, and that's where we are. On Christians. Well, on the Christians and their involvement, I mean, Christians are genuinely fully integrated. There are two proscribed Palestinian groups, the PFLP and the DFLP, were founded and headed by Christians, George Habash and Naif Hawatmi. So they are they're not less or more peaceful than the Muslims. There genuinely is total integration. You'd find more Muslims who are closer to the West than Christians who are closer to the West, and vice versa. It is not a religious war there. It's just the identity, the Palestinian identity, national identity, that they want to have, Palestinians want to have an independent state, regardless of faith. Yes, some Christians might be connected to the Anglican Church or the Orthodox Church or the Catholic Church, but that's that doesn't necessarily translate or integrate or influence in the West.
Hana, can I ask your perspective on what Christians can do to try and build bridges and interact?
Yeah, as my colleague here mentioned, that Christian Palestinians have a very historic sorry, I forgot the word. Revolutionary, maybe, actions to defend their land, but at the same time, we all know many names, but at the same time, I would say that our Christian faith is all about, it's not like when we talk about churches is not a political venue. It is more rather about speaking the truth, about reconciliation, about and still the Christians have a long way of resilience in order to keep their steadfastness and keep their roots in the country, in spite of all the challenges that Christians and others as well, Muslims, are really facing. We always have, through our churches, channels to communicate with the authorities in order to make things look better and feel better as well, for a better future for everyone. We do not recognize the hate speech, because hate speech only brings more and more hatred, even for the Jewish people who for young Jewish people who have this kind of hate towards Palestinians, whether they are Christians or Muslims. This is not good even for the Jewish people themselves, because this Jewish young man who might do anything and attack against anyone in the street, if that one is a Palestinian, he or she can do the same for other people, for other residents and citizens. So let's always approach reconciliation and harmony and respect for other faiths, and try to talk about human rights and agreements that we have to really fulfill.
Thank you. And finally, Jamie.
Really difficult. The enmity between people is so big that building bridges and relationships is very, very hard. I remember there was a relationship between the heads of churches and the president back at Christmas last year. I think it was Christmas last year, it might have been the year before. And talking to Palestinian friends, they couldn't believe that there'd been this connection. There was a real concern. It's very difficult, and you have to, there needs to be people brave enough to step out beyond what is considered normal within their community to begin conversation. Otherwise, we aren't going to get anywhere. And when I listen to the friends and the organisations that we work with who bring people together on a grassroots level, it's the same situation. People have to be in a situation where they're able to be challenged with their worldview and step into uncomfortable situations, which is difficult on a grassroots level. And imagine if you're a church leader, how hard that is when your congregations will turn against you. So there are clearly connections. The Catholic Church has been good at getting food into Gaza. I noticed when there was the unfortunate bombing of one of the churches not long ago, very quickly, the situation was allowed within 24 hours. The Greek Patriarch and the Latin Patriarch were in Gaza because they have those connections. Right. So there are back channels, yeah. And we need to encourage and pray that those continue because they're essential, even if they're not publicised. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Are there any more questions? Gentleman at the back. I will just wait for the microphone. There we are.
Thank you very much. If I may ask the panel, do you believe that Christians living in the Holy Land have a better life under Israel or under Hamas or the Palestinian Authority regime? Thank you.
Hana, we'll come to you first.
The issue is not about whether the Christians will have a better life or future under any authority. The issue is whether this authority will recognize the other person. Because if I recognize you, if I recognize the other person, if I respect your faith, if I respect your needs, then I can live in a better life. So I do not have an answer whether Hamas or whatever is better for Christians unless we have a guarantee of the issues that we as Christians need, that our future should be respected.
You have an answer.
The gentleman says, is there any, can you elaborate on that? I think the gentleman asked a very specific question. Are you able to give a bit more detail, sort of answer where you think life would be better?
I don't really have an answer for this. I'm sorry.
And I think it's a very good question, sir. And I think one of the things that I would certainly not want the event to pass without recognising the diabolical persecution of Christians under Islamist Muslim Brotherhood, ISIS, which characterises the entire region. And I think one of the reasons that I thought this debate would be worth having a discussion of is because we've seen Israel as a place where we don't have to worry about about any kind of persecution of Christians, and it's against that context that we're having the discussion, not in any way comparing the existence for Christians currently in Israel, Palestine, Jerusalem, with the diabolical persecution that's happened elsewhere in the region. So I just wanted to make that completely clear, because I think that was probably what was behind your question. I just wanted to be absolutely clear about that. I'll come to Ghanem, who's probably better qualified than I am to give you a better answer.
I think it's a good question. 100% agree with Charlotte that the context is important. Distinguishing Christians from Muslims in the Holy Land, whether in the PA or in Israel proper, I think doesn't lead anywhere, because there is discrimination against Christians in the Holy Land, in Israel, let me say, not because they're Christian, but because they're Palestinian. So this is the same degree of discriminations, whether they were Muslim or Christians, because they're under occupation in the West Bank and effectively second-class citizens in Israel proper. Now, the situation in Gaza is different, because Hamas is horrible, and as Charlotte said, Muslim Brotherhood. That's no one wants to live there, Christian or Muslim or anyone with a positive IQ would not want to live there. I think the question is it's similar to Muslims. Living under the Palestinian Authority is not great. Obviously not great. There are there's Christian mayor of Ramallah, for example. The Christian ministers. The foreign minister of the Palestinian Authority is an Armenian Christian, a family friend. So Christians are part of the government, but living under the Palestinian Authority is not ideal.
So there is a best place.
No, I wouldn't move to either of those places.
Doesn't it depend
Not
on
now.
the leader, though? Doesn't it depend on the leader? Because in Syria, when Assad was the leader, Christians could live side by side, and there was no problem with the rest of the region.
I think as we're approaching the end of our session, and other people have had to leave because people have got other sessions, obviously not as interesting as this one to move on to. So I'll very quickly take your question, because I'll give you a mic, and then we'll wrap it up.
Surely the question shouldn't be whether the Christians would prefer to live under Hamas rule as opposed to Israeli rule. Surely the question should be, do the Palestinian people, Christian and Muslim, prefer to have their own state in which they are free to practice their faith, to run their livelihood, to have access to the airports and seas and everything else? Surely that's the question, not. So I think that the question, to be honest, I think was respect to your question, but I don't. Every people has a right to self-determination and to live freely in their own land. And at the moment, the Palestinian people, whether they're Christian or Jews, Palestinian or Muslim, do not have that, and they're living under a regime which does not treat them equally.
Will Jews be allowed in your Palestinian state?
Jews and Muslims and Christians lived very happily together for hundreds of years in Islamic Spain, and that was their golden period, yes.
Thank you.
Jews were persecuted in Spain. Timmy, T-H-I-M-M-I.
I'm a student of history.
Timmy.
I'm a student of history.
Jews suffered under Muslim rule.
Muslims were protected by...
Will Jews be allowed in your Palestinian state?
They went to Turkey.
I'm going to say...
Jews be allowed in
I'm going to be an absolute killjoy.
You do not know your history.
Can I say? I think we're taking us back to Jonathan's opening comment of disputatiousness. Can I say a huge thank you, firstly, obviously, to our panelists, particularly to Hana, who's joined remotely, which is always tricky. But can I say a huge thank you? Some of the audience have left because we're running to the end, but to all of you here for engaging so honestly and vocally and making this such. It's always a difficult topic to talk about, but you have been absolutely amazing. Thank you for discussing it. Thank you for coming. And it just shows that actually we can have these kind of conversations, which are the ones we do need to have if we're all going to live in peace and security alongside each other. So to everybody here, thank you very much indeed.
But a big thanks to you, Charlotte.